He declined the third call at 6:52 on a Thursday evening without reading the text that came before it. That's the part Audrey would return to, not the wet road, not the emergency room, not what Dr. Fenn said when she walked back and holding the scan results with that particular carefully leveled expression that nurses learn to read before they're 2 years into the job. It was that one small thing, his thumb moving across the screen, her name disappearing, his attention returning to the conference room without a single break in stride. She had something to tell him, something she'd been carrying for 11 days like a stone, sewn into the lining of her coat, something she had written out in texts and deleted, practiced in the car on the way to work, held in her mouth through 3 shifts and 2 nights of not sleeping, and one Tuesday afternoon when she'd picked up her phone to call him, and then put it back down on the counter, and finished making Gracie's lunch instead. Heath Rourke, chief of cardiology at Mercy General, the man other surgeons called when they'd run out of options, looked at her name on his screen and thought, she'll understand. She always does. She was already looking for her car keys when he thought that. Audrey had found the lump herself, which was the kind of thing that happened to nurses. Not because they were more vigilant than other people, but because bodies were their professional fluency, and she had simply known the way you know when a patient's color is off before you check their pressure, before the numbers tell you anything. She'd known and she'd made the appointment and she'd sat in Dr. Okafor's office that Thursday morning while Gracie was at school and listened to words like biopsy and imaging suggests, an early stage, very treatable, excellent prognosis if we move in the next 3 weeks, with her hands folded in her lap and her face composed in the expression she used when she needed a family not to panic. She drove herself home. She picked Gracie up from school. She made pasta. She did not tell anyone because the person she wanted to tell had a board meeting that afternoon and a surgery at 7 the next morning, and she didn't want to call him while he was scrubbing in. She didn't want to text something that large. She wanted, and this was the thing she kept coming back to, the want she kept turning over like a stone. She just wanted someone to sit with her, not to fix it. Heath was a fixer. She understood that. She had loved that about him once and was less sure about it now. She didn't need fixing. She needed someone to sit beside her on the couch and hold her hand and say, "I'm here," and mean it as a fact rather than a calendar appointment. She texted him at 5:45. "Can you talk tonight? I have something I need to tell you." She stared at the send button for 20 seconds and then pressed it. He didn't respond. She called at 6:20. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again at 6:38, same result. At 6:49 she sent, "Heath, please, I just need to hear your voice." The word please cost her something. Audrey Voss did not use please as punctuation. She used it the way it was meant to be used, precisely, deliberately, as a last resort, and she had used it now, and she sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, while Gracie watched cartoons in the other room, and she waited. At 6:52, he declined the third call manually. She saw it happen. The brief ring, then nothing. His thumb had found her name and moved. She sat there for another minute. Gracie padded in from the living room in her purple socks and purple pajamas. It was a purple week, as Gracie designated certain weeks, and stood in the doorway, looking at her mother on the kitchen floor with the open, unself-conscious concern of a 6-year-old. "Mama?" "I'm okay," Audrey said, and then she stood up, because standing up was the honest answer to that question. "I'm okay, Bug. Let's do teeth." After Gracie was asleep, she sat at the kitchen table in the dark. She thought about calling her sister Meg in Portland. She thought about texting Britt, who was on the overnight shift at St. Raphael's, and who would have answered immediately and driven over and been wrong in all the right ways, the way only your oldest friend could be wrong. She thought about a lot of things sitting in that kitchen, including a thing she hadn't quite admitted to herself yet. The folder on her laptop titled Logistics, which contained a shortlisted job listing at OHU in Portland, a screenshot of an apartment her sister had toured on her behalf in February, and a quiet note to herself that said if not by June, then just go. She'd made that folder 6 months ago. Not because she didn't love him. She did. She loved him in the careful, clear-eyed way of someone who has learned to account for what they're choosing, and she was choosing him knowing his limitations and her own capacity to work around them. The folder existed because she had finally understood the difference between hope and patience, and she had been practicing the latter and calling it the former for long enough. But tonight felt different. Tonight she was sitting in a dark kitchen with 11 days of medical news pressing against her ribs and a daughter asleep in the other room, and the specific silence that follows a declined call, and she thought, one more time. Try one more time the actual way. Drive to him. Stand in front of him. Say the words out loud with your face. She wrapped Gracie in a blanket and carried her to the car. She had not left Gracie asleep alone in the apartment. She had considered it 3 miles, 20 minutes, but she was an ER nurse, and she knew precisely what could go wrong in 20 minutes. And she knew herself well enough to know she would not be able to concentrate on anything except the 20 minutes until she was back. So Gracie went in the back seat, half awake and entirely unbothered, clutching the sleeve of Audrey's coat for approximately 4 seconds before going back under. It was 7:31 p.m. The rain had been falling since noon, the slow, persistent kind that accumulates on roads without anyone noticing until it's too late to account for it. She was 4 blocks from Heath's building when she took the right onto Morrison and felt the rear tires let go. It happened in the way these things happen, fast enough that her body reacted before her mind caught up, and slow enough that she registered every second of it. The correction she made was the right one. The hydroplane corrected. And then the left front tire found the curb at 15 miles an hour, and the airbag deployed, and the world became white and loud, and then very, very quiet. Her first word was Gracie. Not a question, a fact, a reaching toward, the name that preceded every other thought she would have for the next several hours. She turned. Gracie was crying, not hurt crying, scared crying, which is a specific sound that Audrey had cataloged long ago and could identify from the next room. She unclipped her own seatbelt and reached back and got her hand to Gracie's face, her cheek, the unhurt, warm skin of her cheek. "I'm here," she said. "I've got you. You're okay." She was aware of something warm on her own face. She addressed that second. Dr. Fenn was 29 years old and had the particular competent steadiness of an ER physician who had decided early that the right response to almost every situation was to gather more information before forming an opinion. She examined Audrey with the same attention she gave everyone, ordered a CT based on the mechanism of injury, and went to check on 3 other patients while the scan ran. Gracie was in the pediatric bay next door, assessed and found uninjured, currently making serious inroads into a cup of orange jello with a nurse named Damaris, who had a gift for 6-year-olds that Audrey recognized and was grateful for in a way she couldn't articulate right now. She lay in Bay 4 and looked at the ceiling and thought about what she still needed to do tonight and organized it into the kind of list that her brain made automatically under stress, the way she'd been trained to triage, most urgent first, everything else after. Gracie, fine. Herself, concussion symptoms, manageable, she'd been awake and coherent the whole time. Car totaled probably, but insured. Heath? She stopped there. She hadn't called him from the scene. She'd told the EMTs she had an emergency contact, given Heath's number, and then corrected herself at the last moment and given Britt's instead, not because she was trying to keep this from him, but because she was sitting on the shoulder of a wet road at 7:45 p.m., and she didn't yet know what she wanted to say. She would call him from the hospital. She would tell him the thing she'd come to tell him, and she would tell him about the accident, and she would see how it landed. Dr. Fenn came back at 9:15 with a different expression than she'd left with. "Your head CT is clean," she said. "Mild concussion, which we expected. I want you to rest here a few hours for observation." She sat down in the chair beside the bed, which was not standard for a clear CT result. "While the scan was running, we got incidental imaging of your upper chest." Audrey already knew what came next. She could read the shape of it from the way Dr. Fenn had positioned herself, the particular quality of attention she was giving the space between them. You've had some imaging recently, Dr. Fenn said. This morning, Audrey said. Would you like to tell me what they found? She told her, all of it, the lump she'd found herself, the oncologist, the biopsy timeline, the prognosis. She told it the way she told things at work, organized and precise, and with the details in the right order. And when she was done, she looked at the ceiling again and thought, I have now told this story twice in one day, and both times I've been alone. In the next bay, she could hear Gracie explaining something to Damaris about the correct way to eat Jell-O, which apparently involved a specific wrist rotation. She took out her phone and called Britt. Heath's alarm was set for 5:45. His phone lit up at 6:18 with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Are you Heath Rourke? Audrey asked me to reach you if anything happened. She's at St. Raphael's. She and Gracie are okay, but please come. He was in his car in 4 minutes. The drive took 11. He parked in the emergency lot and walked through the automatic doors and found the nurse's station and said Audrey Voss, and the charge nurse looked at him once and said Bay 4, second hallway left. Someone's with her. Someone was Britt, who had come at midnight and apparently hadn't left. She was standing in the hallway outside Bay 4 with a coffee from the vending machine, and she looked at him the way she always looked at him, assessing, not warmly, and then she said, She's awake. She'll want to talk to you alone. A pause. She also needs you to not make this about you. I'm saying that in advance because it might be useful. She moved aside. He went in. Gracie was asleep in the reclining chair in the corner, covered in a hospital blanket, one arm wrapped around a stuffed rabbit she had apparently acquired from the pediatric department. Audrey was sitting up in the bed. There was a white bandage above her left eyebrow and the specific alertness of someone running on no sleep and a fair amount of adrenaline, and she looked at him when he came through the curtain with an expression he couldn't read. Hey, he said. She didn't say it back. You declined the third call manually, she said. I watched it happen, and then I sent you a text with the word please in it, Heath. I don't use that word casually, and you know that. I know. I needed to hear your voice last night. That was the whole thing. I just needed. She stopped, started again, more quietly. I had my hand on the phone for 3 days trying to find the right way to tell you something, and last night I stopped trying to find the right way and just tried to reach you, and you sent me to voicemail. He sat down in the chair that was not occupied by his sleeping 6-year-old. Not his. Gracie was not his. He understood in this moment that this was a distinction he had been careless about for 14 months. I thought you'd be okay, he said. You always. He heard it as he said it. He stopped. I'm a person, Audrey said, not with heat. Just the fact of it, placed between them. I'm not a contingency plan for your quieter evenings. I'm a person who needed you last night, and I've needed you other nights, and I've gotten very good at not saying so because I didn't want to be the woman who asked for things. He looked at his hands. She told him, the lump, the oncologist, the biopsy. 11 days of carrying it alone through shifts and school pickup and pasta for dinner and Gracie's purple week. The prognosis, good, early, treatable. She said this efficiently the way she said all medical information. And then, without shifting her tone, she said, I wasn't driving to your apartment to ask you to fix anything. I just wanted someone to sit with me. That's it. That's what I've been trying to ask for. The number landed in the room between them, 11 days. Why didn't you? He started. I tried to tell you 4 times last night, she said, and 4 times the week before. And I kept stopping because there was always a surgery or a meeting or a consult or something that could not wait. And I decided that I could wait, and I got very good at that, and I shouldn't have. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Portland. She looked at him. Britt mentioned it, he said. She wasn't trying to tell me. It came up. Audrey looked at her hands in her lap. 6 months ago, she said. I found a job listing at OHU. My sister's there. She has a spare room, I thought. She paused, choosing the words carefully. I wasn't running from you. I was running towards something I'd stopped believing I could have and also be with you. A life where I didn't feel like the thing that gets to when everything more important, is handled. He didn't defend himself. There was nothing to defend. Last night I decided to try one more time, she said, to actually ask, to drive to you in the rain and stand in front of you and say, I am scared. I need you here. And then this happened. She looked toward Gracie, still sleeping, one arm around the rabbit. And here we are. He sat in that chair for a long time after she asked him to leave. He sat with her words the way you sit with something you've been handed that you understand now you were always supposed to be carrying. I've gotten very good at not saying so. He had made her good at it. He had created, through 14 months of meetings and early surgeries and phones set face down on conference room tables, a woman who'd taught herself to disappear quietly rather than ask for one more thing. He stood up. He picked up his jacket. I'm glad you're both okay, he said. She didn't answer. He walked out. He didn't go home. He went to his office at Mercy General and sat at his desk in the dark for 40 minutes and did not open his computer. He thought about a lot of things, including a specific Tuesday 3 months ago when Audrey had called him at 7 p.m. and he'd been on rounds, and she'd said, it's nothing. Don't worry about it when he called back an hour later. And he had believed her because it was easier to believe her, because she was always okay, because he had made that into a permission he hadn't examined. At 9 a.m., he called Dr. Pratt, his department chief, and requested a 6-week leave of absence for personal reasons. Dr. Pratt said, is everything all right? Heath said, no, but I think it can be if I don't get this wrong. He went to St. Raphael's gift shop. He bought the most impractical stuffed animal they had, a large purple rabbit wearing a graduation cap, which was an odd combination. But Gracie had come out of that bay with one rabbit, and he thought she might want a second, and left it at the nurse's station with a note that said, for the kid in Bay 4. No reason required. He didn't sign it. He texted Audrey, the biopsy, the surgery when it's scheduled. I want to be there, not nearby, there, wherever that means for you. Tell me when. He did not follow it up. He waited. She didn't respond for 2 days. On the third day, she sent, Thursday, the 7 a.m. Don't be late. He wasn't. He sat in the surgical waiting room for 3 hours and 19 minutes. Britt was there, had been there since 6:30, and they occupied chairs on opposite ends of a row of 8 and did not speak for the first hour. Then Britt said, without looking up from her phone, she practiced what she was going to say to you. In the car. On the way to your apartment that night. He didn't say anything. She texted me once, Britt said. Just, Britt, I need, and then nothing. I called her back and she said, never mind. She was fine. She wasn't fine. She just didn't want to put it on me. A pause. She puts things on herself and nowhere else. And the people who love her have to earn the right to be one of her places. You understand what I'm saying? I understand, he said. Britt looked at him. She had the face of a woman who has watched someone she loves manage around another person for a long time and has made her peace with not saying so directly. She appeared to be revising that policy. She's not asking for a lot, Britt said. She never has been. She's asking to not feel like a footnote. He didn't respond because there was nothing to say that would improve on that. At 10:42, Dr. Yamamoto came out in her surgical cap and said, clean margins. Everything went exactly as we hoped. Britt put her hand over her mouth for 2 seconds. Then she put it down and was composed again, and Heath understood something about the particular discipline of people who love without making it the other person's problem. Audrey came out of anesthesia asking for Gracie. With your sister, he said. She made Meg buy her pudding in 3 different colors. That sounds right, Audrey said, and almost smiled. He sat with her while she came back to herself fully, which took about 40 minutes. He brought her water when she wanted it and asked the nurse about the pain scale when she didn't ask for herself, and he was quiet when she needed quiet, which was most of the time. When she was more awake, she looked at him across the hospital room and said, you stayed. I said I would. I know, a pause. I just wasn't sure you understood what that meant. Tell me, he said. She thought about it. She took her time. It means being here when nothing's happening. when there's nothing to solve and nowhere more important to be. Just here. A chair and a room and a person who needs to know you're not going to look at your phone and decide something else requires you more. I understand that now, he said. Because of Thursday. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. I still think about Portland. I know. I'm not saying that to threaten you. I'm saying it because I'm not going to stop saying the true thing anymore. I know that too, he said. I don't want you to stop. Say everything. That's what I'm asking for. Not a decision, not a guarantee. Just say the things. She looked at him with the same careful attention she'd been giving him since she woke up. The kind that doesn't flatter and doesn't punish, just looks. That's a different answer than you would have given me 6 months ago. Yes. What changed? He looked at the window. At the ordinary morning light falling across the floor of an ordinary hospital room. I drove here at 6 in the morning, he said, and I found a woman sitting up straight with a bandage on her head, telling me she'd made a folder called Logistics because she'd gotten tired of hoping. And I understood that I had made her feel like disappearing was easier than asking. That's not. He stopped. A man who does that doesn't get to call himself a partner. I've been doing it for 14 months. I'm trying to stop doing it. She closed her eyes. She was tired in the way of someone whose body had been through something significant, and he let her rest. Before she went under, she said quietly, I'm not coming back to what it was. I'm not asking you to. Okay. It was the smallest door, but it was a door. He spent the 6 weeks learning Gracie's schedule. School pickup on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Swim lesson Saturday morning. She hated green beans with a conviction that was almost philosophical, but would eat edamame without complaint, a contradiction she could not explain and did not try to. She was working through a phase of naming all her stuffed animals after weather events. The purple rabbit from the hospital was named Thunder. The graduation cap rabbit he'd left at the nurse's station, which had, it turned out, found its way to Gracie, was under deliberation. He showed up for Audrey's follow-up appointments without being asked. She told him the date and time once, and he was there. He texted her in the mornings, short, undemanding texts, the kind that required nothing back. Coffee's better this week. Finally figured out the ratio. Or Gracie told me my frog jokes are not that bad, taking it. Britt told Audrey, 6 weeks in, that Heath had texted her the morning of the post-op appointment to ask how it had gone, and then hadn't mentioned that he'd texted, and she'd only found out because he'd referenced it in passing, as if it were unremarkable. I'm not saying that changes everything, Britt said. I know you're not. But it's a thing. I know, Audrey said. I know it is. A Friday in May. Audrey's apartment. Heath had brought groceries and made something that was technically a stir-fry, and Gracie had appointed herself quality control with the serious face she used for matters of importance. After dinner, Gracie was on the couch showing Heath how to play a game on her tablet, and Audrey was at the kitchen sink washing dishes and watching them through the pass-through, and Gracie said, I named the other rabbit. The graduation rabbit? Heath said. He's not a graduation rabbit. He's a doctor rabbit. What'd you name him? Gracie considered this with the gravity that 6-year-olds bring to official announcements. Heath, she said, because it's strong. Mama says strong names matter. He was quiet for a moment, then, that's a very good name. I know, said Gracie, and returned to the game. Audrey stood at the kitchen sink with the water running and her hands still and something shifting in her chest that she didn't have a clean word for yet, but that she was learning, slowly, to stop being afraid of. Later, after Gracie was asleep, they sat on the couch in the quiet of an evening that wasn't performing anything. He said, I have a surgery Tuesday at 7. Okay. I'll leave here at 5:30, but I'll have my phone. If you call and I physically can't answer, I'll text you within 10 minutes, and I'll tell you why. She looked at him. Every call, he said. I know what that costs now. I won't make the same mistake twice. She was quiet for a long moment. You know what I told myself the night I drove to your apartment? No. that it was the last time I was going to ask, that if you didn't answer that fourth call, I was going to let us go, not dramatically. Just let the quiet do what quiet does and move to Portland and be fine. She looked at her hands. And then you finally answered. 11 days too late and 4 calls too late. But the corner of her mouth did something complicated. You answered. He reached over and put his hand on hers. Neither of them said anything. The apartment held them in its ordinary way. The hum of the refrigerator, the white noise from Gracie's room, the neighbor's dog that barked every Thursday at something no one else could see. This was what she had wanted. Not a grand gesture, not a rescue. Just this. A man in a chair on a Friday night who had learned, through the specific education of consequence, that presence was not a gift you gave when it was convenient. That the people you loved were not footnotes to the more important document of your ambitions. That the call you declined was the call you would reconstruct later, second by second, looking for the moment where a different choice led somewhere different. She turned her hand over and held his. It wasn't a happy ending. It was better than that. It was a beginning earned at real cost, imperfect and careful, the only kind that lasts. Outside, the city went about its enormous, indifferent business, full of people navigating their own dark kitchens, their own quiet storms, their own folders labeled logistics that they hadn't yet decided whether to delete. And for the first time in 6 months, Audrey Voss went to sleep without one.